Let's move on to the next speaker, and this is on quality assurance. Dr. Alyssa Peleo-Alampay is Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs, Academic Assessment and Development System of the University of the Philippines System, in charge of quality assurance and other academic matters. She is a professor of geology at the National Institute of Geological Sciences at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She obtained her BS and MS in geology at the University of the Philippines and her PhD in earth science at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, University of California, San Diego, USA. Let us
good morning, everyone. I hope my internet is working okay today. Can you hear me well?
Yes, it's fine.
Yes, it's okay, because it's been choppy earlier. Thank you very much, Professor Raimundo and Professor Giselle Concepcion for inviting me to this session. Thank you, of course, to PAASE, and congratulations on its 40th anniversary. Today, I'm putting on one of my hats, professional hats, I guess. Actually, it was Dr. Concepcion, VP Giselle then, who is responsible for putting me in this particular line of work. I was assigned to curriculum. At the time, we were going through a lot of changes in higher education and actually in basic education, K-12. And at that time, UP needed to revise its GE, General Education Program, at the same time do a lot of curricular revisions and also engage with the nation in terms of transitioning into the K-12 curriculum. And of course, because all of our UP faculty are experts in content, we volunteered ourselves, again, another initiative of then Vice President Giselle Concepcion, to help out, to help CHED and actually also DepEd in the transition, especially with providing content. And so along the way, I was also actually on the second day of my job, I was also given the task of enhancing or putting sort of another start, I guess is what we can call it, to what we call quality assurance in higher education, which in UP then was not called by those terms, but actually were called by different terms. No? But we were all sure as UP faculty and staff and students that we were always aiming for honor and excellence, which is our battle cry in the University of the Philippines. And now we're at the juncture in our history where, you know, we have to adapt to this so-called new normal that we are going through with the pandemic. So thank you everyone for being here and trying to listen to my talk after a biology talk by the former speaker. No? So I'm joined, of course, the content of the slides are, of course, taken from not only the QA staff that I work with, Rika and Dax, but also from some presentation slides that Dr. Bautista has given in the past and some other colleagues. So this is basically the outline. There's a lot of introduction to a certain point of the QA in the University of Philippines and why we are going through this really big enhancement, which we started a few years back. And you know, what is happening in UP in terms of transitioning to online learning and what we can learn from other practitioners in QA on the QA standards or the role of QA in remote learning and what we can do about it. So in terms of quality assurance, quality is actually a very common term for a lot of us. And of course, as educators, we all know what it is about. Whatever definition of quality you have in mind, that's also very, very applicable to the issue of quality assurance in higher education. So it's a multidimensional concept, entails functions and activities, everything, anything in particular focused on teaching and learning, and everything else that goes with it into delivering excellent or excellence or quality in teaching and learning. It entails a review, which means an internal review or an assessment, a self-evaluation of your own degree program. And usually that internal assessment is subjected to an external assessment or accreditation, as most people know it. No? So it is really based on, the assessment is based on whether or not the degree program or the institution is able to reach its own goals. So it's not goals that other people have set for them, but it's goals that that particular organization or degree program has set for itself. No? So that's why we go into the subject of outcomes, for example. So that's why we've been stressing outcomes, learning outcomes, program outcomes, course outcomes in this conversation of the enhancement of the quality assurance in UP in particular. So context is also very important in the issue of quality assurance. You have to have goals, missions, and alignment of your outcomes based on what you have, what the conditions are and what you want to be. Even CHED in 2012, because of a lot of external forces, has also formalized its definition of quality in higher education in our institutions. So it's the alignment and consistency of the learning environment with the institution's vision, mission, and goals, demonstrated by exceptional learning and service and the development of a culture of quality. So the hardest part of this entire definition is that last phrase there, the culture of quality, which is something that all organizations or higher education institutions would like to reach. It's like the nirvana of quality assurance, because that culture is very hard to instill in everybody. So the quality assurance really builds on the definitions or the processes of quality assurance or the quality process that people have started in the business world, especially in manufacturing a long time ago. That's why there was some opposition to this, because they think that we're the elements of quality assurance are just like a factory, but actually it's not. Now, of course, there's a very big human factor to it and a context to it, especially in higher education and especially in UP. That context is something that we always have in mind whenever we do things. So it's the PDCA cycle or the Deming cycle, as quality assurance practitioners would call it. So you plan, do, and check and act on that quality assurance process, and it's a cycle. And so you continuously do these things, you plan for it. What do you want to do? You do it by, for example, in the curriculum, you plan what your curriculum is all about, or the revisions, you do the revisions in the curriculum. You check on it by getting feedback from all the stakeholders. You act on that feedback and change or revise your curriculum, and then you implement it again with the changes in mind. So, and it goes around and around, and you have to keep on repeating that process systematically with all of the stakeholders involved. In particular, in our higher education context, usually most of the input involves all of the elements that are needed in order to deliver teaching and learning effectively, all the services and the resources, and of course the process that we go through, including the quality assurance of the process. And then we have the outputs, the outcomes, and the impact. So output is the lowest level, I guess, or lower level resultant, where you just have the number of graduates. But when you measure outcomes, it becomes it's a measure of the change that occurred because of the process. Were you able after producing the graduate, for example, what was the outcome? Were they able to serve the industry or their particular discipline? How were they able to get their jobs? Were they fit for their jobs in particular? And then in impact, that's the highest level of resultant, where you can, are your graduates affecting their discipline in one way? Are they game changers in those disciplines? And this whole process has to be dynamic and changing. Now in QA, the criteria that are used by most QA instruments or QA standards are actually more or less the same. No? It doesn't differ too much from the vision mission to all the services, the quality of the staff, the teaching and the administrative staff, the leadership, the buy-in of the leadership into the quality assurance process, the infrastructure, the research that the faculty and the researchers are doing, assessment of students, engagement in the community, and of course, the internal quality assurance of that particular organization or degree program. Now, why did we geared up, I guess, for quality enhancement, quality assurance enhancement in UP? It was because in the last decade or so, there has been a paradigm shift in the world. From the tagline of globalization, we have now gone into regionalism. From development or economic nationalism to globalization, a world market participation, from catching up with the West to finding one's niche in the market. And because of this, there is now, we have now the breakdown of national borders and emergence of regional economies. So instead of looking at it from an entire global view, we are now looking at these regional economies, in particular the EU, the ASEAN economic community is part of this particular change in the world today. And so because we are regionalizing, there are mobility has been enabled. So people would like to be able to work in the region freely and to be able to exchange resources freely in particular regions. No? So because of that, there is a demand for comparability and what we now call as national qualifications frameworks and regional referencing frameworks. So the ASEAN actually is an economic and social community, but it is also a political entity as it confronts potentially divisive political issues. ASEAN education agreements are likely to be institutionalized despite differences in education systems. And in nationally higher education as a system and not as higher education institutions need to balance regional standards and local or national relevance. And basic education is of course part of this. And that's also one of the reasons why probably because we're one of the last already to that our country shifted to the K-12 curriculum, which has long been delayed since the time of actually post-war, post-World War II. You know, we were already starting to go into the K-12 system, but time and time again, we've actually delayed it, you know, as a country. Now, in the course of all of these regional agreements and under the ASEAN, especially in the education frameworks, there's now what we call as the ASEAN Quality Assurance Framework, or the ACAF. No? And the purposes of the ACAF are to promote regional harmonization in higher education by developing a QA framework, facilitate regional recognition of degrees and qualifications, and the ACAF, or the framework, serves as common reference point for QA agencies and higher education institutions as they strive towards harmonization amidst the diversity of universities, cultures, and traditions within the region. This ACAF has four interconnected quadrants. There's the External Quality Assurance Agency, the External Quality Assurance Standards and Processes, Institutional Quality Assurance, and National Qualifications Framework. So in a sense, what does it mean? It means that for each country that all of these quadrants should be in place somehow. No? So for us, it's in particular, we are, as a university, we're actually involved in the green part there, the institutional quality assurance. And so that's why we're trying to enhance it right now. The framework also enables comparisons of education qualifications across participating Asian member states. And the objectives, of course, of the AQRF, this particular framework, are the following: supporting recognition of qualifications, developing qualifications frameworks, developing approaches to validate non-formal education, which is the TVET that we have, promote learner and worker mobility, lead to better understanding of qualification systems, and promote these qualification systems. The AQRF is actually just a common spine of levels to which the NQF, or National Qualification Framework, can relate to. So in the middle, as you can see, there's these yellow yellow pogs over here in the middle. And as you can see, country A and country B examples are just trying to align to these yellow stands in the middle. So the AQRF is the spine. And so country A and country B may have different qualification levels. And so they just, we just have to reference them. And I'm happy to report that I think last year or the year before, actually Vice President, now Vice President Cynthia Bautista was a part of this referencing of our country to this ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework. So that's one big development in terms of our participation in the ASEAN. So what happens? Really, there is harmonization on all levels of national systems of qualifications and quality assurance processes to facilitate recognition. And that's very important to us, especially in the context of the University of the Philippines. Even if we are UP and we think of ourselves as the best in the nation, the top university in the nation, there have been some instances where we had to defend our bachelor's degree holders because if your system, quality assurance system, is not referenced and it's not K-12, for example, it was the main problem, our bachelor's degree holders will not be recognized in other countries. Also, from my personal experience, I've had graduate students who finished their master's with me, and we found PhD professors for them to continue their work. But in other countries, in particular in Germany, for example, our degrees are not recognized because we lack the 2 years of secondary education, because they just count, really. That's what they do. No? In many of these systems, they count the number of years of secondary and tertiary education. And if it's lacking in certain years, and for us it was 2 years, for our generations, then they don't qualify for the PhD, even if they finish their master's in the University of the Philippines. So those students had to undergo some they had to justify their degrees with the help of the university, but at the same time talk to international officers in those universities and tell them and sort of negotiate together with their advisors that they become sort of temporary students for a while, not temporary, what do we call this, on probation for about a semester or a year to prove that they can do the work, and then they're made to do certain projects and then undergo a test. And many of those students are able to hurdle these tests, but then, you know, that really becomes a problem because of all of these, because of our engagement before in these frameworks or in these ASEAN systems. So a national qualifications framework is a quality assured national system for the development, recognition, and award of qualifications acquired through different ways and methods. It's a hierarchy of levels of complexity of learning, using learning outcomes as the metric. It's a system with level descriptors that allude to cognitive and functional competence. And in the ASEAN, because of our cultures, personal and ethical competence is actually valued in these national qualifications framework. What does it look like for the Philippines? As you can see here on the left, here are the levels of qualifications from level 1 to level 8. And then basic education is the anchor. So grade 12 is the anchor. And from grade 12, one person can actually go through the technical education and skills development track from NC1, for example, to the diploma level, and then also migrate onto the higher education track where you have the bachelor's, post-bachelor's, and the doctoral track on the right side here. And as you can see from the arrows, this just means that somebody who used to be in the technical, or what we call VocTech track, can actually go into the baccalaureate track by accomplishing certain certifications. No? So that's what we're opening actually to our citizens, the possibility for a person to go from technical education or from the VocTech track actually to the higher education or the university track by going through certain certifications. And as you can see, in higher education, usually when you have your baccalaureate, that's level 6, post-baccalaureate or your master's is level 7, and the doctoral track is actually, when you finish that, you're already at level 8. And so these levels are what most countries are using in order to level themselves or reference themselves. So if somebody from the Philippines with certain certifications or diplomas goes to another country, and the certifications or those diplomas are referenced against these particular levels on the left, actually based on the learning outcomes and the competencies that are defined for each of these levels. Now in UP, because of all of these changes, quality assurance now has become part of the strategic plan of our administration, starting from the Pascual administration to the present Concepcion administration. Quality assurance has been given a particular focus when we try to reach the goal of our commitment to academic excellence. So QA in higher education involves basically two big aspects. First one is internal QA and the other one is external QA. As I explained earlier, internal QA is within the organization. This is your self-assessment. And then external QA is when somebody else outside of that particular degree program or unit looks at your self-assessment report and validates or gives you points for improvement. In UP, we developed our own homegrown quality assurance system that is based on our culture and our history and our people. And of course, as you know, and I don't know if most of you know that actually quality assurance has been around since about 2000. So it's been the system is actually quite old in the university. It's just that we've tended to make it voluntary because of the way that we are. So we call it the Internal Academic Assessment and Development System, or EADS. It used to be in paper form until sometime around 2017, I believe, that it was computerized. And so we now have a portal where our faculty and our QA coordinators can input all of the data. We've always said that the internal quality assurance of the university is also pegged a lot on our very historically long curriculum review system, which we are trying to streamline, of course. And we've gone through all of these curricular revisions in the past years, which was quite painful, but probably also a bonding activity for many of our units. We've also gone through a lot of review and revision on our student evaluation of teaching instrument, our feedback surveys, and our other measures for review. So all of that goes into IQA, or internal QA. And then we've also embarked and engaged a lot with our neighbors in terms of getting accreditation or assessment, in particular with the AU and ASEAN University Network for Quality Assurance. Some of our degree programs go through PAASE, for example. Some go through PACOCOA accreditation, while our professional disciplines are undergoing accreditation based on criteria by the Washington Accord, the Seoul Accord for IT, and the Canberra Accord for Architecture. In particular, the last bullet here, other external review, is something that the University of the Philippines is actually using and promoting for programs who may not be ready yet for the more formal review systems of the other accreditation agencies. And so we've allowed our programs to be externally reviewed by experts or QA practitioners in their CUs, but outside of their degree programs, or else from other universities. All of these, of course, the entire system is pegged on here on the right, what I put in as the vision, mission, and strategies of the organization, UP, our educational philosophy, and our graduate attributes, and of course, on our program and course outcomes. The EADS is actually also based on the PDCA cycle. Starts with objectives, goes through all of the elements of what goes into quality teaching and learning, and then looks at the product of all of that entire process. So it looks at graduation rates, employment rates, and all of the partnerships with industry and the community, or the public service of the particular program. What differentiates EADS from other instruments or other frameworks is that EADS is a measure of the academic unit, the degree granting unit, rather than just the degree program itself. It has a quantitative assessment portion and a qualitative assessment portion. There's a score, and the score is only there so that we can benchmark with each other if necessary, but that quantitative assessment or that score is actually not the most important. The most important aspect of EADS really is the self-evaluation of degree program as to how they're standing in terms of their goals. What is in the course of implementing this enhancement in quality assurance, we try to understand each and every day what UP is all about. It's a very big organization. We have 8 constituent universities, and each of these constituent universities, or what we used to call as campuses in the past, are actually autonomous. They have their own chancellors, and they can they govern themselves in a way, no? But they're all under the umbrella of the system. And there are about 21 campuses plus all over the country, and former VP Giselle Concepcion was part of the putting up of a lot of these campuses, the new campuses in particular. And this really is a challenge for us because we're all over the Philippines, and so anything that you initiate in one CU or constituent university has to be initiated also in all in the other constituent universities, and of course the sizes of our universities also differ a lot. No, UP Diliman being 50% of that entire volume. At the same time, we have a lot of degree programs. This is our strength. Also, we have a lot of degree programs. There are about 500 plus of them, and so that shows our breadth now in terms of the comprehensiveness of the types of degree programs that we can offer. At the same time, we are proud of our faculty members. We have a very good density of PhD and master's holders in the country who are teaching the best of the best, who are our strength and our responsibility. Our stringent admissions program gives us students who are really the best of the best. And so that's what sometimes we are worried about, that maybe despite us, they do well in society and in the world because, you know, in the first place, they are very good students in the first place. But we'd like to think that by going through quality assurance, probably of our programs, that we can, there's a value added factor to being in UP, you know, that UP experience, or the Tatak UP that we always talk about. And so this big responsibility is why we're undergoing this age of quality assurance enhancement in UP. There have been results. To some extent, we don't know if the rankings are the result of QA. It's probably the result of us engaging with the world, us engaging with the rankings to a certain extent, but always mindful of its the pros and cons, I guess is what you can call it. We've had several of our degree programs certified or assessed or accredited by different bodies, quality assurance bodies. We're also proud to be the holders of the most centers of excellence and centers of development in the country according to CHED. Now, what is happening in UP now? And I know that Professor Floor gave us a view of what's going on and what the process of that transition is like for us. So really, it has to be customizable. It has to be according to our particular context. Professor or Dr. Bautista, VP Bautista, actually gave this presentation some few weeks past, showing the so-called 5 pillars of UP preparations for remote learning. In terms of physical infrastructure, connectivity, and others, the academic infrastructure, access to management systems and LMSs, the operationalization and management of remote learning in all aspects, student support, of course, very important, and faculty and staff support. How is this being operationalized right now? There have been for several months now since the lockdown, we have been working on a lot of these things and having it approved at the level of the Board of Regents, but at the same time also trying to communicate all of these initiatives to all of the stakeholders, and making sure that we're able to implement all of these changes, in particular course redesign, and making sure that students and faculty are able to deliver, not the students, but the faculty are able to deliver the programs or these courses in the coming online or remote semesters. And at the same time, looking in on the students and how they are and making sure that they have access to these courses in the coming semesters. There's been a lot of activity in terms of providing for online resources. UPOU, of course, is leading in this. There have been several webinars at the system level and at the different levels of the CUs and also the departments and institutes. Also in terms of training online in workshops for the use of the learning management systems and for teaching and learning. And of course, not forgetting the psychosocial support, especially for our students and even for our faculty members and staff. No? So that's also being promoted right now. Now, what is QA all about? How is QA in remote learning? One message that I can say is that it's not very different. As you can see in this particular figure by Johnson Ongchi Bin, who is one of the AU NQA experts when he gave the talk last month, I think, or the previous month in a share activity. As you can see, I've tried to see, what is so different between the two. Really, it's just for this one, it's the learning environment. And then others include technology. It's really the technology and the infrastructure that's very different. Accessibility, connectivity, the delivery of online, the online mode is really the main difference. But in many cases, in many of the criteria, it's really very much the same. No? In particular, what struck me was as a quality indicator here, it says course completion rates, because in online learning, sometimes that's something that we cannot. It's a little bit hard to keep track of your students, especially if they're all over the world and you're doing asynchronous learning, for example. So course completion rates may be one of the things that may be high, if you really don't take care of this. He also put in a comparison of the online quality framework with the AUN. There's still the 11 criteria here, but AUN is now transitioning into 8 criteria, but basically the same aspects. And in particular, it's the technology and infrastructure that's the main difference between the two. Open universities have also been quite active in terms of putting together their own quality assurance framework. And UPOU is actually part of this particular association, and Chancellor Bandelaria actually was the immediate past president of the Asian Association of Open Universities. And in particular, as you can see in the framework, in the criteria, more or less it's all the same. It's just that, really it's the learning resources, it's the infrastructure really that is very different in terms of course, the delivery would be different also. But in terms of looking at the quality, that is the main difference. Now, there have been many researches and studies on online learning and how to look at it in terms of quality assurance. So this example from the University of British Columbia, from their Center of Teaching, Learning and Technology, looks at all of these petals of this flower here of quality assurance, from planning, design and development, production, implementation and evaluation using the ADDIE model. And also this particular paper by Abdus looks at the phases or the life cycle of looking at QA in e-learning. Before is that quadrant on the right. Planning and analysis, for example, is the first quadrant, and then during the implementation of the online course, design, prototype, and production, and then you go to post-production and delivery. So looking at the life cycle of the process of QA in e-learning, as they call it. So there have been many studies. There are many models that we can use actually if we want to seriously look at the quality of our online or remote delivery of learning, especially in the coming semesters. Our only limitation is that we may not, hopefully we would not have a fully online semester after first semester, but of course that may be overreaching my optimism. But at least, our faculty members will be ready for this remote learning mode, or at the very least blended learning mode in the coming semesters and the coming years to come. This will be my takeaway slide. In the end, what is the relevance of quality assurance in UP today and in many higher education institutions? In particular, I see a lot of benefits. A lot of these things are really very commonsensical, but it's really a message, especially for our UP faculty, staff, and students, that really, even if we go online, the issue or the quality assurance is still the same. It's the mode of delivery. There may be a different vocabulary, but basically it's all the same. And the benefits are also there and will be very helpful. Faculty and students get to know their program better because they have now been able to understand what the vision and mission of the university is, what the goals of their programs are, their outcomes, and aligning all of these things. Tweaking or redesigning the program and the courses will be easier, especially in this time of online learning or remote learning. We're into this period right now of redesigning our program and looking at how we can best deliver it in the coming semesters. In quality assurance stakeholders, all of us are involved and we all have a voice. The members of the degree program can also work more effectively in producing the desired graduates based on their context, whatever they have, anchored on the vision, mission of the institution, the climate in the employment world or in industry or in the creative field, the needs of the country, which is very important for the University of the Philippines as the national university. It will also be easier to do strategic planning because we have assessed our strengths, identified gaps for improvement. This facilitates implementation of new initiatives, new plans, and also enables us to be able to benchmark our programs in our units with other universities and with other degree programs that have more or less the same goals. It also, I think, very important for our academic units. It promotes more venues for communication and collaboration among us. It leads to, I think, better understanding, that feeling of team spirit and collegiality among all of us. And with that, thank you very much. And thank you for the organizers and for listening today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alampay. That was a very informative talk indeed. Is there any burning question that we have to ask Dr. Alampay right now? Because otherwise we can proceed to the...
Sorry, I lost.